Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES for 10% off any purchase over $10. If you use that promo code between now and January 28th, you will automatically be entered in a drawing to win a Ravnica Allegiance booster box. Check out the description below for details. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to day 2 of official Ravnica Allegiance previews. We have a lot of cards to look at today, so I want to get right into it. But just like yesterday, we're going to recap and analyze quickly all the cards that were previewed over the last 24 hours. If you're curious about sources, check out the description below. You'll be able to match up which content creators presented each of these cards today. Quickly, before we get started, just a fast reminder, if you check out the description below, you'll find a few ways to support the channel, one of which is our Patreon page. You're also going to find links to products on Amazon down below. And finally, Flipside Gaming still offering a promo code for our viewers. Hopefully you can check that out and save yourself a little bit of cash. But as always, thank you not only to the folks that look at those links, but to each and every one of you. Y'all make the channel what it is, and I appreciate y'all. But let's get into today's cards. Smothering Tide. This is a white and 3. It's an enchantment rare. When an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If the player doesn't, you create a colorless treasure artifact token, and of course you can tap, sacrifice that token to add 1 mana of any color. Okay, so treasure tokens are back. I didn't see that one coming, but it does feel like a very Orzhov type of thing with taxation and all. Although you don't usually find a lot of ways to ramp in white, so that's kind of interesting. But is the card good, I guess is the question. Well, I don't see myself playing this in standard. Yeah, I'm sure Revel and Riches is still a thing, and maybe if you really want to get into a crazy brew, you could do that. But for 4 mana, I just don't think this is quite good enough. It puts the decision in your opponent's hands, which is never a great thing. And if I spend 4 mana, I already have a fair amount of mana. I'm already pretty well into the game. And when you're in turn 4, turn 5, turn 6, there's going to be some big plays happening in standard. You don't want to be playing this. That treasure token that you might get is not going to do enough at that point, I don't think. Now in limited, I might consider playing this because I do think it's more powerful in a limited game than it would be in a standard game, especially sealed maybe. But I'll be honest with you, once I get down to my last few playables and I'm making those last few cuts, I could see myself just taking this out for a creature. If nothing else, I'm intrigued to see if they bring out any other cards that create treasure tokens. Precognitive Perception. 2 blue, 3, instant, rare, draw 3 cards, addendum. If you cast this spell during your main phase, instead scry 3, then draw 3 cards. I really love the addendum mechanic. It makes you make a decision here, and in this case, you can either hold this back until the end of your opponent's turn, like maybe you would normally do with this, or if you use this on one of your main phases, you get the opportunity to scry 3 first, which is very powerful. So this is a good card draw spell, not just in limited. I'll play it in limited and be pretty happy with it, obviously. But in standard, I do think this creeps into some control builds. I'm not thinking 4 of in a control build, but maybe 1 or 2 to complement Chemister's Insight. I still think Chemister's Insight will be the go-to draw spell, but I do think this is good enough to consider for sure. This also works well with Teferi's ability to untap some of your lands, and I do think because of that interaction, this will do some work, no doubt. Overall, another solid card from this set. We've seen a lot of good ones over the last couple days. Gutterbones. This costs 1 black. It's a Skeleton Warrior, rare 2/1. This enters the battlefield tapped. Pay a black and 1, return this from your graveyard to your hand. Activate this ability only during your turn and only if an opponent lost life this turn. So let's talk about limited first with this one. If you're in a Rakdos aggro build, I think this will be a very good card for you. If I'm drafting, I'm not necessarily thrilled to first pick this. If I go down this path, I'm going down a very specific path. And if I make this my first pick and I can't get into a really aggressive build, even though this is a monocolored card, I might not be too happy. So if I can find something else in the pack, I might lean in that direction. But I don't think it's going to be horrible if I get forced to pick it and I just try to force myself more into some kind of Rakdos aggro build. Another place where this could be good and limited is perhaps some kind of aristocrat-style deck. We will see some cards later in the video that contribute to that, but there may be more in the set, and if that's the case, being able to sacrifice this for some kind of benefit, and then bringing it back, doing it again, could be good. Now, it also stands to reason if an aristocrats deck can get there in standard, then this card actually might see some standard play, or even a really good Rakdos aggro deck. It might be able to be a part of standard in that capacity as well. Now, another thing this card could do in standard is work with Jumpstart. Pitch this for a Jumpstart spell, bring it back, and you still get some value out of it. The card goes back into play eventually. So there are a lot of ways you can think to use this card in standard, which makes me believe it's going to get there one way or the other. but I do think mostly it's just a pretty solid limited card. Pestilent Spirit. Okay, this is going to cost a black and 2. It's a spirit rare, 3/2 menace, death touch, instant and sorcery spells you control have death touch. Similar to Soulfire Grandmaster in that capacity. But here's what I really like about this card. 3/2 for 3, menace, death touch. Sure, the other ability's cool. Every once in a while it will come into play, definitely. But this is really hard to block. It's really hard to deal with. Many times you're going to get a 2-for-1 out of it if you're putting the pressure on your opponent at the right time. So simply, if I'm in an aggressive build of any kind, maybe it's Rakdos, maybe it's something else, I think I could see myself playing this actually in Standard, even though, yeah, 3/2 is a little fragile, and just like most of the creatures we're going to talk about today, it dies to Lava Coil, but you can't worry about Lava Coil. You still got to play your game, and it's good enough to get there. In Limited, this is going to be awesome for you too. If you're lucky enough to get this in your sealed pool, or if I'm drafting, I would first pick this card in a lot of packs, just simply because it's a powerful monocolored creature. It doesn't set you down the path of a guild right away. It leaves you pretty open, and I'd be happy to play with this, no doubt. Roar of the Carnarium. This comes to us from a Spanish language preview. It's an uncommon, 2 black and 1 sorcery. All creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. Exile all creature cards that were put in the graveyard this turn. If a creature dies this turn, exile it instead. So this is reminiscent of Golden Demise. It just doesn't have the Ascend ability, which lets you kind of protect your stuff sometimes. However, it does have this exile ability instead, and I like that a lot. Obviously, there's a lot of reasons that I don't want things going into the graveyard in the upcoming Standard. Afterlife is one of them, for example. So if my opponent has a lot of Afterlife creatures out, I kill some of them with this. I don't have to worry about those Afterlife tokens. Also takes care of those small spirit tokens that might already be on the battlefield. I like when they print the answers before we have the problems, not to say that Afterlife necessarily would have been a problem in the next meta, but I'm glad there is a stopgap just in case something were to occur, right? Now, aside from that, this does take care of things that are already in the format as well. Rekindling Phoenix, if you can use another spell to finish it off the turn you play this, wonderful, then you don't have to worry about the Phoenix coming back. I think this is good enough to see Standard play out of sideboards going forward. In Limited, it's a good card. It just depends on what you're trying to do with your deck. If you have a lot of small creatures, maybe you're playing Rakdos aggro, this might backfire a little bit on you sometimes, so you might not always run it in your main deck. But if my opponent is on a plan where they have a lot of small creatures, or maybe they're in Orzhov playing Afterlife, I will certainly bring it in. Spawn of Mayhem. This one's a mythic, 2 black and 2 demon with spectacle cost of 2 black and 1, 4/4 flying trample. At the beginning of your upkeep, Spawn of Mayhem deals 1 damage to each player. Then if you have 10 or less life, put a +1/+1 counter on this. There is a lot of economy here for 4 mana. 4/4 flying trample for 4. But if I'm in a Rakdos aggro build or something, I'm shooting to play this on turn 3. If I can do that, that's a lot of beef on the battlefield on turn 3. It's going to be hard for an opponent to recover from that. Yeah, maybe Lava Coil will do it. But again, you can't play around Lava Coil your whole life, right? You got to play your game. You got to play some Magic at some point. So this is going to be a fine card. Because of so much that's going on here for 4 or maybe 3 mana, I do think it will see some Standard play. Also, it's a great way to enable other Spectacle cards in the future. Once this is on the battlefield, the ping every turn will help you turn on Spectacle for other things. That's kind of awesome too. In Limited, this is a mythic. You're not going to see it a lot, but you're going to be real happy when you do. This is first pickable easily in a draft pack. In fact, if I saw this, I don't know if I would look too hard at all the other cards in the pack. This is a monocolored, very powerful creature, like I was saying earlier. But even if this costs 2 different colors, I'd still probably Windmill Slam it. Amplifier. Okay, I like the name of this one, but that's maybe the best thing about it. It costs 2 red and 2. It's an elemental, rare, 1/1. At the beginning of your upkeep, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. Until your next turn, Amplifier's base power becomes twice that of the card's power, and the base toughness becomes twice that of the card's toughness. Put the revealed cards on the bottom of your library in a random order. So it's just a high variance card, and it's very fragile until your next upkeep, which doesn't feel real good either. And it doesn't have trample, it doesn't have evasion, so even if you do get lucky and hit something big, it doesn't mean this card's going to do a whole lot for you either. So it's just high variance and just doesn't necessarily get the damage across that you would hope, right? And being a 1/1, it might not survive that long to get to that point. So even if you try to make a deck around this thing and put in a lot of big creatures, they can be chump blocked by a token, and then again, you just have to wait to the next turn and do it all over again. Just doesn't feel real good to me. So I don't think it's seeing Standard play. What about Limited? Do I play this thing? I'll be honest with you, most decks I would say probably not, because I'm paying 4 for this 1/1, and if it survives, there's a good chance I'm going to just hit a 2/2 in my limited build, right? Draft and sealed, you're going to have a lot of 2/2s or 2/3s, maybe some 3/3s in there. You might get lucky and hit something big, maybe one time. Yeah, I don't always see myself running this even in drafts and seals, just because, granted, at times it can be a large creature. I mean, if I see a 2/2 with this, it's actually a 4/4 until my next turn. But it still doesn't have evasion, it still doesn't have trample, and it doesn't have any additional abilities at all. If I have 4-drops that have more interesting abilities or evasion, I'm probably just going to play those. Skargon Hellkite. This is going to cost you 2 red and 3. It's a Mythic Dragon 4/4 with Riot and Flying. Red and 3. This will deal 2 damage divided as you choose among 1 or 2 targets. Activate this ability only if this has a +1/+1 counter on it. Alright, so you kind of have a choice here. Granted, there are other ways to put +1/+1 counters on this, no doubt, but the easiest will be the Riot ability. So either you have a 4/4 flying haste creature for 5, or you have a 5/5 that does not have haste, but that ability will automatically be turned on. Yeah, I like that flexibility. Some situations would call for one, some would call for the other. Nothing wrong with that. And let's face it, these dragons that are flying haste 4/4s for 5, they typically see standard play in some capacity. Now, this is competing with a lot of good cards. You have things like Arclight Phoenix and Rekindling Phoenix out there already, but I do think some decks might be interested in this, especially if they're trying to go super aggro. Maybe it's out of the sideboard some of the time in certain matchups, but I do think this will see at least a little standard play as we move forward into this next meta and in the future. In Limited, this is another like windmill slam for me because it is a mythic. I won't see it a lot, but if I open my first draft pack and this is in there, I'm going to be really happy because it is, again, another monocolored creature that's very powerful. And much like the other creature I was talking about a moment ago, even if this was in 2 colors, I would still consider first picking it and most likely do it almost every time. Now, aside from that, in Commander, it's another dragon for you if you like to play some Dragon Tribal. Enray's Forerunners. Okay, this is 3 green and 5, very expensive. It's a rare 7/7 boar. Vigilance, Trample, Haste. When this enters the battlefield, other creatures you control get +2/+2 and gain Vigilance and Trample until end of turn. Okay, so let's cut to the chase with this one. It's very expensive. Could I ever see this making it into Standard? It's like a mini Crater Hoof Behemoth, and we have seen cards like this before. Even Eldritch Moon had Decimator Provinces. But I have to consider the fact that I do think Ramp's a little more consistent now than it has been in the past recently. You have Llanowar Elves and such. There's a chance, maybe a slim chance, but if the green Stompy deck can kind of find its footing again, or maybe it becomes a Gruul Stompy deck after this set comes out, there's a chance this could be a high-end portion of the curve, maybe a 1 of or 2 of in a deck here or there. If it does get there, though, I do think it will be a little bit niche. Now, aside from that, do I want to play this in Limited? Well, if I can cast it, because you're going to be in 3 colors a lot of the times, I think, whether you're playing Draft or Sealed, especially Sealed. So if I don't feel comfortable with that 3 green, maybe I want to skip this one. But if I feel like my deck can pull this off and I have some ramp behind it or something, yeah, I'm going to go for it. It could be game-winning for me if I can pull it off. Growth Chamber Guardian. If you're wondering why the art looks so weird here, when Wizards released the card today, they had a motion video for the art. So I'm not sure what the final art will look like, but here's the card. Green 1, Elf Crab Warrior, rare 3/2. Adapt 2 for green and 2. When 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on this, you may search your library for a card named Growth Chamber Guardian, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Okay, this is a really sweet limited card. Now, hear me out on this one. You're going to say, it's a rare, I'm never going to have 2 of these in my deck. No, you're not, unless you're really, really lucky, and that's awesome. But even if I don't have 2 of these in my deck, let's say I just have the 1, it's a 2/2 for 2 with crazy upside. It's good early, it's good late, because simply, I start off with a 2/2, but later on, when it needs to be bigger, I pay 3, now it's a 4/4. I'm pretty happy with that, actually. That's a great limited card. It's also a monocolor card, which is going to be good for draft purposes. I'm sold already on this card when it comes to Sealed and Draft. What about other formats? I'm just not feeling it for Standard. I don't think it does enough there. Now in Standard, I could put 4 of these in my deck, but I think it's just a little too slow. We've seen some cards like this before do well in the format, but those are cards that typically just need to be played before you can start searching up other copies. I think if I was playing, say, Green Stompy or Gruul Stompy or something like that, there's just better cards I could be using than this one right now. There's just a lot of really strong cards in the format. So the last thing I'll say about this card, even though I don't really think it's going to show up in like a modern elf deck or anything like that, don't underestimate the fact that this is an elf that lets you search up other elves, even if it is the same type. and maybe you could take advantage of that in Kitchen Table Magic. This next card is a Japanese language preview, loosely translated Plan of Protection, a green and 3 enchantment. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if that creature does not have the same name as another creature you control or a creature card in your graveyard, draw a card. This is a rare. So that's actually kind of interesting. Now, in Standard, again, it just doesn't feel great to me. It doesn't work with tokens, and obviously you will be building decks with multiples of the same card, same creature card. So it's not always going to activate, and it costs 4 to put out there. I don't want to put this out for 4 and have it sit there and do nothing for a number of turns. That doesn't feel good to me. However, in limited games where I'm playing multiples of creatures less frequently, this does get kind of interesting. I'm still concerned about playing an enchantment for 4 that does nothing on its own. However, I do feel like the risk will mitigate itself in most games of Draft or Sealed. This could be interesting in Commander. I mean, there's a lot of really powerful ways to draw cards in Commander. I don't know if you need this, but obviously it almost feels like it's tailor-made for Commander. Wilderness Reclamation. Okay, this is a green and 3. It's an uncommon enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, untap all lands you control. Alright, that's kind of sweet, right? So it works really well with Addendum, so keep that in mind, especially for limited purposes. And I do think this is going to be an awesome Commander card. That's where I want to go first with this one, because this is the type of ability you want to have in Commander. Basically, you can play your big creature or put your commander out of the command zone onto the battlefield, and then untap your stuff and hopefully be able to protect yourself as you go through everyone else's turn. That's phenomenal. So I do think you're going to be really happy to slide this into a number of different Commander decks. Does it see Standard play? I think it does. Nexus decks. The Bat Nexus decks will want this, and I do think you will see those decks perhaps performing even better in the next meta than they did in the previous one. So I do think you will see some Standard play out of this card. I already mentioned the interaction with Addendum, but in Draft or Sealed, is there any other reasons to play this? Maybe. It just depends on what my deck looks like. If I have a lot of instants or creatures with flash or something like that, then yeah, definitely I would probably try to fit it in. If I don't, then I have a forecasting cost enchantment that might not be doing much more than bluffing for me, and I might be able to have something better go in my deck. Basilica Bellhon. This is going to cost 2 black and 2 white. It's a Spirit uncommon 3/4. When this enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card and you gain 3 life. This isn't as exciting as the other ones in this cycle, unfortunately. It's not bad in limited. It is 2 on color for both colors, so it's not something that's very easy to splash, so you do have to have kind of a specific makeup of your deck to play this. But if you can swing it, I'd play it and be happy with it in Draft or Sealed. A 3/4, and you're gaining 3 life, and your opponent has to discard a card for 4 mana, even though it is very color intensive, is okay. Like I said, not as good as some of the other cards like this we've seen already, but it's okay. Bullrock Clan Crusher. This costs a green, a red, and 3. It's an Ogre Warrior, uncommon 4/4. Tap, remove a +1/+1 counter from a creature you control, and then this will deal 2 damage to any target. Well, I don't think finding +1/+1 counters is going to be too difficult in this limited environment. I think this is a fine limited card. Maybe not first pickable for me, but I do think if I'm in the Gruul colors and I see this pass to me, I'll be pretty happy overall. A 4/4 with this ability for 5, yeah, feels good enough. Outside of limited, I don't really see this in Standard. I think it's a little slow for what it does there. Next we have High Alert. This comes to us from a Spanish language preview, and this is an uncommon blue, white, and 1 enchantment. Creatures you control deal damage with toughness rather than power. Creatures you control can attack as though they didn't have Defender. Blue, white, and 2, untap target creature. So this would play well with Arcades the Strategist, which definitely is something I might consider in Commander. So just throw this in kind of as a redundancy in some ways. And you also have that mana sink to untap your creatures, so that's kind of cool for 3 mana. I can see myself doing that. Aside from some situations within Commander, I don't know if I use this a whole bunch. Now, there's nothing that makes me feel like I need to throw this in a Standard deck right now, unless, of course, the set's going to bring us a whole bunch of high toughness Defender creatures we haven't seen yet, which I kind of doubt. But aside from that, the same kind of goes for Limited. The mana sink's interesting here, but it's not good enough for me to play this for 3 mana as an enchantment, I don't think, unless I had a lot of high toughness creatures, maybe some Defender creatures. If that's the case, who knows, maybe this card is a little better, but until we see more of the set, it's hard to say. Pitiless Pontiff. This costs a white and a black. It's a Vampire Cleric, uncommon, 2/2, pay 1, sack another creature. This will gain Death Touch and Indestructible until end of turn. So let's talk about Standard first. In the past, when we were talking about the Afterlife mechanic and such, we were trying to figure out if an Aristocrats theme would be possible in Standard. Well, this is a step in that direction, Don't think this gets us there on its own, but maybe if there's more cards like this, it's possible. And if that's the case, then yeah, maybe this could see standard play. Another place where it maybe could see play, even though it's a long shot. Remember, the vampires are still around from the Ixalan block. Maybe a card like this or a couple other cards in this set might make that deck better. If that's the case, it could have a revival, although I do think, like I said, that might be tough to get that deck back off the ground at this point. Now, aside from that, though, in Limited, I'll play this and be pretty happy with it. It's a 2/2 for 2 with upside. You know how I feel about those. Granted, 2 different colors, but still, I'm happy to run this. It makes combat difficult on your opponent, too, because you can use that ability on the fly. They don't know if you're going to give it Death Touch and make it indestructible at any given time. So they're going to be taking 2 damage from this probably much longer than they really should have to, just because of the threat of the ability, if nothing else. It could also slow down the game a little bit just because of the threat of this ability on the defensive side as well. It's going to work really well with Afterlife creatures, especially boring ones. If you have like a small Afterlife creature that could turn into a 1/1 flying token, you'll definitely consider just getting rid of that small creature and attacking in with the token if you're trying to really keep the pressure on, or if you simply need to chump block a flyer or something like that. So it does give you some options. Overall, I'm not necessarily seeing myself first picking this in a draft, but I think it's a solid card for draft or sealed. And it is a vampire for you vampire tribal fans out there. Prime Speaker Venifar. Blue, green, and 2. It's a legendary creature, Elf Ooze Wizard, Mythic, 2/4. Yep, Elf Ooze Wizard. Tap, sacrifice another creature. Search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost equal to 1 plus the sacrificed creature's converted mana cost. Put that card onto the battlefield and shuffle your library. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. Okay, very similar to Birthing Pod, which was a powerful card in the past. Could this be as powerful? Well, the thing with Birthing Pod is you have to have a very specifically crafted deck around it, and Birthing Pod could come out quicker than this. So I do think those are going to be some issues. Also, this being a 2/4 creature, it's going to be more fragile than Birthing Pod was. So I don't know if it quite gets there. Maybe, just maybe, someone's going to try to brew some sort of Birthing Pod style deck in Standard, I have no doubt. Could it get there? Well, I'm pretty skeptical, but again, we have a lot of the set to see, so who knows? Maybe there's some other tools out there that could make it good. Now, I don't really see this replacing the banned Birthing Pod in Modern or anything like that for the reasons I mentioned earlier. However, you know where I do like this card? Commander. I think it could be really fantastic there if you build around it a little bit, of course, have a real clean curve. You could have some good combos, some of the combos that we used to see in the Birthing Pod deck even, and just find some good efficiency with strong enters and leaves the battlefield effects. Could be a fun build around, and this is a way to basically make Birthing Pod your commander if you want to, because it is legendary, so that's kind of cool too. In Limited, I don't know if I always play this. I do think I will try to, though. If I have a clean curve, it could be pretty decent for me, because if a creature's going to die anyway, or if my opponent's thinking about destroying a creature, they know that I could simply sack it and go get something else a lot of the time. That makes their plays a little more difficult. They have to be more thoughtful, and I do like that. Aside from that, though, there is a downside because in Limited, you have a smaller deck. 40-card decks, you're going to start going through your deck at some point. You might start finding some gaps in that chain. If I pull all my 4-drops out of my deck and I have a 3-drop on the battlefield, then I can't really get anything for it. So that's a little bit awkward. Just remember that, but I do think you could build a deck where this could still be strong for you. In Limited, it just takes a very specific build. Maybe it's more of a draft build than a sealed build. Rakdos, the Showstopper. It's kind of funny. I'm not necessarily a big Rakdos, like black-red magic person, but I love the Rakdos Guild. I love the names of these cards. Anyway, red, black, and 4, legendary creature demon, mythic, 6/6, flying trample. When this enters the battlefield, flip a coin for each creature that isn't a demon, devil, or imp. Destroy each creature whose coin comes up tails. Okay, so this is a high variance creature, but it's a big creature. So look at it this way. You're getting a 6/6 flying trample creature for 6. I like that. Now, it might take out some of my stuff. I don't like that. But it also might take out some of my opponent's stuff. Worst case scenario, it wipes out all my creatures and it doesn't touch any of my opponent's creatures and I still end up with a 6/6 flying trample creature. That doesn't feel that bad to me. In Limited, I'm going to play this and be pretty happy with it. It's mythic again, so you're not going to see a whole lot of this, obviously. But if I happen to get it, and again, I would probably first pick this, even though it is a double color spell. I'm okay with that. I mean, it's still very, very powerful. And I can still splash one or the other if I don't end up in Rakdos colors. That's not a problem, especially in this environment. So I think it's decent, even though the high variance might be a little annoying at times. It's still a very, very powerful creature at the end of the day. Now, I do think the high variance will keep it out of standard. I don't really see it doing much for the casting cost and the variance attached to it. But, you know where I like this again? Commander. I want to build a Demon Devil Imp deck. I didn't know I wanted to do that until just now, and because it inspired me, I assume it's going to inspire others too. Ravager Worm. I like this mythic. 2 green, red, and 3. It's a worm with Riot for 5. When this enters the battlefield, choose up to 1. Ravager Worm fights target creature you don't control. Destroy target land with an activated ability that isn't a mana ability. Okay, so not every land, of course, can be targeted by this, but some can, and that might come in handy from time to time. For the most part, though, I'm more interested in the first choice you have there, which is the fight choice. Combine that with the Riot, and you have an interesting decision on your hands. For 6 mana, I either have a 4/5 with haste, or I have a 5/6 that can fight when it enters the battlefield, and perhaps even take out a 5/5 and still survive. That's kind of sweet. Because of that, I do think this does see standard play. Now, the big question is there a deck that will want this in standard? Even though it costs 6, it feels expensive, but it's doing enough that I feel like it's powerful enough to get there. But the deck that wants this has to get there in the meta. That's the trick. That deck is probably something along the lines of a Gruul Stompy deck, and if that deck's powerful enough, then yeah, this could see standard play. One other place where I would be interested to see if this card could perform, maybe test it a little bit, would be Modern Gruul Land Destruction. Yeah, believe it or not, Modern. Now that Land Destruction deck does play Carnage Tyrant sometimes, so it does play some big creatures. Makes me kind of wonder if it would like something like this. Now the Land Destruction ability does not take care of any land, of course. It is very conditional, but I'd at least want to test it out there. Aside from that, this is an awesome limited card, but it's a mythic, much like a lot of the cards we're talking about today. You're not going to come across them all that often, but if I do open this up in pack 1, I'm probably still going to first pick it, even though it is a gold card. Seraph of the Scales. Black, white, and 2. It's a mythic angel, 4/3 with flying. Pay a white, it's going to have Vigilance till end of turn. Pay a black, it's going to have Death Touch till end of turn. Afterlife 2. Alright, so first thing you're going to say about this card is it's kind of fragile, right? 4/3. It's going to die to Lightning Strike. It's going to die to Lava Coil. Now, if it dies to Lightning Strike, you get the Afterlife 2. So that's not the worst thing in the world. Still keeps the pressure on with 2 little flyers. I do like that. If it dies to Lava Coil, then that's kind of sad, I guess. But like I said earlier, you can't just live in fear of Lava Coil. You gotta live your life. So I think this is actually good enough to maybe see some standard play. Here's what I like about it. First off, that Vigilance for 1 white, that's interesting because of the Afterlife. Typically, that wouldn't intrigue me that much. But because I could attack in with Vigilance with a 4/3 for just the 1 white, then I can keep it back as a blocker. If my opponent really does want to attack me with like a 6/6 ground pounder or something, I could block it. And that chump is going to allow me to either be defensive and then chump in the future with my 2 Afterlife tokens, or just keep the pressure on and attack in with those tokens. Secondly, the Death Touch, that's not that good because, let's face it, a 4/3 flyer with Death Touch, does it really need Death Touch most of the time? Every once in a while that might come in handy, but for the most part, it's not going to mean a whole lot. It's the Afterlife that really pushes this card for me and makes me feel like it might see some standard play. Maybe the Angels deck could evolve a little bit, and you could see it in there. That is a deck that performed well last season, and with the mana getting better, maybe you could work this in. That would be interesting to see. Or maybe just an Orzhov or Mardu Afterlife deck generally might run this. It's not the most powerful card we've looked at today, but I do think it has some potential. In Limited, I'm super happy to play this, though. I think it's going to be another really amazing mythic if you happen to get it. Teysa Karlov. Alright, this one is not a mythic, it's a rare. Black, white, and 2. 2/4, legendary creature, human advisor. If a creature dying causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Creature tokens you control have Vigilance and Lifelink. Okay, there's a lot happening here. Could this see standard play? I think it could if the right deck again can get there. It has to probably be an Afterlife deck, whether that's Orzhov, Mardu Colors, whatever. I do think that this card would be great in a build like that, but I'm not 100% there that will be a big deck in the meta. If it gets there though, yes, this will see standard play. Now, maybe this could also see play in perhaps an Abzan token build that isn't necessarily super reliant on Afterlife, but maybe just using a lot of the strategies we saw from the previous meta, just recycled into a new deck. And that could be very possible as well. So I do think at some point we will see her kicking around standard at least a little bit. Here's where I really like her again though. Say it with me now. Commander. Token strategies will like her, obviously. Decks that have some good death triggers will like her, obviously. So there's a lot of good reasons to use her in that format. She's legendary. You could try to make her your commander and build around her. That could be interesting too. So I think she'll be a lot of fun there. In limited, she's only going to be good if you can do something with the abilities. A 2/4 for 4 isn't exciting, so you want the abilities to be able to do something. Now, if you're in these colors, hopefully you got some Afterlife cards and it's going to be great with those, right? If you don't necessarily need to splash this if you don't have things that it can do. I don't know if I like first picking this in pack 1 of a draft because it does set you down a very specific path. Next, we have a Spanish language preview. It's Canonize and Consume. Canonize is going to cost you 1 and then a white-black hybrid. Instant, exile target card from a graveyard, draw a card. So basically a cantrip here that's going to let you keep moving through your deck, although exiling a card out of a graveyard can be important from time to time, so that could come in handy regardless. Consume, black, white, and 2 sorcery. Target player sacrifices a creature with the highest power among creatures they control. Gain life equal to that creature's power. Now, it is target player, so if you need to gain life in a pinch, you could use this on yourself. But, you know where you want to use this? On Carnage Tyrant, yep. So, I do think that this will see standard play out of sideboards just because of the consume side to take out things like Carnage Tyrant. It doesn't target it, so you get around that hexproof. That's really, really sweet. Now, if it's early in the game and you don't need the consume or you just need land or something like that, the Canonize can help you out there too. So overall, I think this is a really solid card. In limited, this is another very strong pickup. I would consider first picking this. Even though it's an uncommon, I do think it could be better than some of the rares out there. Next card comes to us from a Portuguese language preview. It's another uncommon split card, Carnival and Carnage. The Carnival side, red-black hybrid, instant. It will deal 1 damage to target creature or planeswalker and 1 damage to its controller. Okay. Carnage, black, red, and 2 sorcery. It deals 3 damage to target opponent. That player discards 2 cards. Now, this one is more of a limited card for me, just because I don't really feel like either side is big enough for standard. The first side is a little small. The second side is cool, but it's a little too expensive. In limited, however, I'd be happy to play this. I'm really playing it for the Carnage side, but there's a couple reasons I might want to do that. Going 3 to the face in Rakdos colors is great because you know that's an aggressive build to begin with, right? So you might just need to keep putting the pressure on. This card will do that for you. And in a pinch, the Carnival side kind of does that for you too. But really making them discard, so if they have any answers, they start to lose them. That's pretty sweet as well. Now, if I'm in a more controlling build, maybe my black is leaning towards more control than aggro for some reason, then Carnage is still pretty good in that type of strategy too. So I can see myself using this quite a bit there. But in draft, I don't see myself necessarily first picking this or anything. I would just kind of wait until I know I'm in a deck that wants it. Depose and Deploy. Another split card here that's an uncommon. The Depose side, you can pay a white or blue and 1, instant speed. Tap target creature, draw a card. Okay, that's pretty good. Deploy. Blue, white, and 2, instant speed. Create 2 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying. Then you gain 1 life for each creature you control. Alright. Again, this is more of a limited card for me. I feel like it's a pretty good one though. Again, not something I necessarily want to first pick. But if I can pick this up in the middle of a pack, even the earlier portion of the pack, I could be happy with it. If I'm up against an aggressive build, gaining life could be important. Now, it is dependent on board state, but you know you're going to be gaining at least 2 life for the 4 mana and giving yourself a couple blockers. And remember, this is an instant, so you can use this as a combat trick too. Or if you're trying to be more aggressive, hopefully that's the case and you're winning, you can attack in with those 1/1 Thopters. Aside from that, tapping down a creature could buy you a little time and lets you cantrip, so that's kind of nice too for just 2 mana at instant speed. Overall, nice versatility, and I do think it's going to play well with a lot of the other strategies we have been seeing. Alright, well that wraps it up. A lot of cards today. A lot of mythics, a lot of rares. I don't know what we're going to be looking at next week. A lot of commons, I suppose. I don't know. They gave us a lot of big cards today. So, until next time, where we're going to do this all over again tomorrow, please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible through the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page, as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.